The knock. The Strangers begins with two people already in pain. James and Kristen arrive at his family's vacation home after a difficult night. A marriage proposal that didn't go the way either of them hoped. The house is quiet, the mood is heavy. Everything that happens next could have been avoided if they had simply stayed that way. Then, at 4 in the morning, someone knocks on the door. A young woman stands on the porch, calm, too calm. She asks if Tamara is home. James tells her she has the wrong address. The woman apologizes and disappears into the dark, and here is the decision that opens the door to everything that follows, literally. Because instead of locking it, bolting it, and calling someone, they leave it unlocked. Because nothing happened. Because she was probably just lost. She was not lost. 3 masked strangers have already chosen them. Not for any reason that will ever be explained. Not for money or history or motive. Simply because they were home. What follows is one of the most suffocating home invasion films ever made. 2 people systematically hunted inside a house they believed was safe, in a location too remote for help to arrive in time. The worst decision in The Strangers isn't the unlocked door. It's the assumption underneath it. That danger announces itself, that something is wrong only when it looks wrong. The strangers were already outside before the knock. The door was never the real problem. The belief that the night was safe was the baby. A Quiet Place builds its entire premise on a single brutal rule. Sound means death. The Abbott family has survived longer than almost anyone in a world overrun by creatures that hunt purely by hearing. They communicate in sign language. They walk barefoot on sand-covered paths. Every step of their daily life is engineered around silence. And then Evelyn becomes pregnant. To be clear about what this decision means inside the logic of this world, a newborn cannot be taught to be quiet. A newborn communicates in exactly one way at maximum volume with no ability to understand consequences. In a world where a whisper can bring something lethal through the walls in under 30 seconds, a crying infant is not a complication. It is a sentence. The film acknowledges this. The family builds a soundproofed box. They prepare. They plan for every contingency they can imagine. But planning and execution are different things. And what the film understands with devastating clarity is that no amount of preparation fully accounts for the chaos of a real birth in a real house during a real crisis. What makes this decision remarkable isn't that it was made. Grief, love, and the human need to continue don't disappear because the world ends. It's that the film refuses to judge it because the worst decisions in horror are rarely stupid. They're human. And sometimes being human is the most dangerous thing of all. The festival. Midsommar opens in grief. Danny's family dies in a tragedy she carries alone while her relationship with Christian slowly collapses under the weight of his indifference. When Christian's friend Pelle invites the group to his commune in rural Sweden for a once-in-90-years midsummer festival, Danny is reluctantly included. A trip to help her heal, new surroundings, fresh air, the uncomplicated warmth of community. Everything about Horga is immediately, specifically wrong, and the group can feel it. Villagers who smile a fraction too long, rituals explained with just enough detail to sound reasonable, rules that seem cultural until they don't. And yet, one by one, every warning gets rationalized away. The cliff ceremony is tradition. The strange food is custom. The disappearances are misunderstandings. The academic curiosity of studying the commune becomes a reason to stay longer than instinct would allow. The decision that defines Midsommar isn't any single moment. It's the accumulated choice to keep explaining things away, to mistake comfort for safety, to assume that warmth is always genuine because it feels genuine. Pelle's invitation was not spontaneous. The commune selected them. Each person was chosen for a specific purpose within a ritual that had been running for centuries before any of them arrived. Midsommar is a film about the particular danger of belonging somewhere that needs something from you, and how invisible that need can be when it's dressed in flowers. The Cave. The Descent begins as a story about grief and friendship. Sarah lost her husband and daughter in a car accident. A year later, her closest friends plan a caving trip in the Appalachians to help her move forward. Fresh air, physical challenge. The uncomplicated relief of doing something hard with people you trust. Then Juno reveals casually and too late that she didn't book the cave system they planned to use. She booked a different one, an uncharted one. One with no documentation, no rescue maps, and no record of anyone having gone in and come back out. She wanted an adventure. When the tunnel collapses behind them, sealing the exit, the group is already miles underground with equipment for a mapped system, not an unknown one. No one above ground knows where they are. The maps Juno brought are useless, and something is already moving in the dark below. The decision that condemns everyone in the descent isn't going underground. It's the lie that preceded it, the private substitution of a dangerous unknown for a manageable plan dressed up as spontaneity. Juno chose for all of them without telling them she was choosing. And in a cave with no exits and no light, that decision cost every single one of them something they couldn't get back. The creatures are terrifying, but Juno already made sure no one was getting out before the first one ever appeared. The blind man. Don't Breathe presents its decision with unusual honesty. Rocky, Alex, and Money are not sympathetic by accident. They're thieves, and the film knows you know it. When they learn that a blind, isolated Gulf War veteran is sitting on a $300,000 cash settlement in a Detroit house with no alarm system and no witnesses for miles, they make a deliberate calculation. A blind man can't identify them. A blind man can't chase them. In and out. Nobody gets hurt. Every single part of that calculation is wrong. Norman Nordstrom lost his sight in combat. What he kept was everything else. Spatial memory so precise, he navigates his house with the certainty of someone who built it. Hearing calibrated to detect footsteps through walls. Physical strength that the group's confidence fatally underestimated. And something in the basement that changes the nature of the film entirely when it comes to light. The worst decision in Don't Breathe is the assumption that vulnerability is the same as a weakness. That a man who cannot see is therefore lesser. That his isolation makes him safe to rob rather than impossible to escape. The group walked into a house they didn't understand, looking for money that came from grief in a neighborhood that had already been abandoned by anyone who might help. Norman Nordstrom was not a mark. He was a trap, and they picked a lock themselves. The home movies. Sinister opens with Ellison Oswalt making a decision so specific in its wrongness that it deserves its own category. A true crime writer who hasn't had a major success in a decade, Ellison moves his family into a new house without mentioning one detail. A family was murdered there, in the backyard. He wants access to the crime scene for the book he's researching. His family doesn't know. They never asked to be research tools. But that's not the worst decision. In the attic, he finds a box of home movies, Super 8 reels labeled with mundane family titles. Pool party, barbecue, lawn work. He sets up the projector and watches. What he watches is not family footage. Each reel documents a different family's murder, filmed as if it were a home movie, complete with a figure in the background that shouldn't be there. A symbol he doesn't recognize. A pattern he doesn't fully understand yet. And he keeps watching. Every night, alone in the dark. As the symbol becomes clearer, as the figure becomes more present, as the children in his own house begin sleepwalking and drawing things on walls. Ellison knows what he found. He knows what it likely means. He calls a professor, pieces the history together, and discovers something ancient and specifically hungry. Then he makes his final decision. Instead of leaving, he moves back to his old house, taking the box of films with him, taking the thing inside it home with him. Ambition didn't just cloud his judgment in Sinister, it carried the door open. The map. The Blair Witch Project gives its characters one job, one navigational task that requires no equipment, no experience, and no particular skill. Don't throw away the map. Heather, Mike, and Josh enter the Black Hills Forest in Maryland to document the legend of a local witch. They have a map, they have compass headings, they have enough food and supplies for a short trip. What they lose on the second day is the map thrown into a creek by Mike during an argument, gone before anyone can retrieve it. From that moment, every decision made in the forest is a guess. North becomes a direction that contradicts itself. Familiar terrain reappears where it shouldn't. Landmarks circle back. The group walks for hours and ends up where they started, not by chance, but by something deliberate working against them from just outside the frame. What makes the Blair Witch map the most consequential, discarded object in horror history isn't what it represented practically. It's what losing it revealed. That the forest was already doing something to them. That the disorientation preceded the argument. That Mike didn't throw the map because he was careless. He threw it because something had already started working on him. Three people entered a forest with everything they needed to leave. The decision to destroy the one thing that guaranteed an exit didn't start an argument. It ended a story that was already written. They just hadn't read far enough to know it yet. The choice. The cabin in the woods understands the rules better than almost any any horror film made before it, because it was built to explain them. 5 college students arrive at a remote cabin for a weekend away. Beneath the facility below them, a massive organization watches and manipulates their every move, adjusting hormones, redirecting paths, ensuring that the ancient ritual plays out correctly. Every horror film archetype is accounted for: the athlete, the scholar, the fool, the virgin, the whore. Each one nudged toward their designated role. And then, in the cabin's basement, the group makes the one decision the facility needed them to make. They start reading from a journal they found. They read a Latin passage aloud. They do exactly what every person in every horror film has ever done with a mysterious book in a dark basement. They read it out loud. The torture family that rises from the ground is, technically speaking, their fault. The facility chose which monsters would appear based on which object the group engaged with first, but the group chose to go into the basement, chose to pick up the journal, chose to read words they didn't understand from a book they had no business touching. The Cabin in the Woods is not a satire of horror tropes. It's an argument that the tropes exist because something requires them to, that the choices feel inevitable because they are, because the need to look, to touch, to read aloud is not stupidity, it's a function. The worst decision in the cabin was never the reading. It was being exactly human enough to make it. The helmet. Prometheus sends a crew of scientists across space to find the origin of humanity. They arrive on a distant moon, descend into a structure clearly built by something intelligent, and begin exploring a tunnel system that has been sealed for thousands of years. They have no idea what sealed it. They have no idea why. They brought equipment. They brought protocols. And then, within the first hour of contact with an alien environment no human has ever entered, 2 crew members remove their helmets because the air analysis came back clean. The air being breathable and the environment being safe are 2 completely different things. One measures oxygen, the other accounts for everything else. Pathogens, organisms, substances that no instrument calibrated on Earth was built to detect. But the helmets come off because it feels fine, because the reading was good, because they've traveled light years for this moment, and a little caution would ruin the mood. What follows is a comprehensive demonstration of why the scientific method exists. Each breach of protocol cascades into the next, touching things that shouldn't be touched, picking up objects of unknown origin, making contact with organisms that respond to human presence in the worst possible way. Every death in Prometheus traces a direct line back to that first moment of impatience. The crew of the Prometheus didn't die because space is dangerous. They died because they treated a completely unknown alien environment like a location they'd already been cleared to trust. The helmet wasn't just protective gear, it was the last thing standing between curiosity and consequence. The tape. The ring gives Rachel Keller one clear piece of information early enough to act on it. There is a videotape. Anyone who watches it receives a phone call. 7 days later, they die. The mechanism is unknown. The origin is unclear, but the pattern is consistent and documented. Watch the tape. Get the call. Die in 7 days. Rachel watches the tape. A journalist investigating her niece's death, she views it as evidence, as a necessary step toward understanding. The problem is that understanding a curse and being subject to it are not different things. The tape does not make exceptions for people with professional intentions. The call comes anyway. The clock starts anyway. And now, Rachel has 7 days to solve something she could have studied from a safe distance without ever pressing play. But the decision that defines the ring's horror isn't Rachel watching the tape. It's what she does when she realizes she survived. She copies it. She passes it on, not out of malice, out of the desperate logic that transferring the curse breaks it. She saves herself by ensuring someone else takes her place. The ring understands something specific about survival that most horror films avoid examining directly, that the instinct to live can produce decisions as monstrous as any killer. Rachel didn't find a loophole. She became part of the system. The tape kept moving. She just helped it along. The pipe, Jeepers Creepers, opens with 2 siblings driving home from college. Gary and Trish are bickering, road tripping, doing what siblings do on long drives through rural nowhere. Then they see a figure on the side of the road dumping what appears to be a body wrapped in bloody sheets down a large pipe. Any reasonable response to this would involve driving faster and calling the police. Gary gets out of the car to investigate the pipe. The rationalization is almost believable. What if someone's alive down there? What if they can help? It's the logic of someone who has watched enough movies to know that doing nothing feels wrong, but not enough to know what doing something costs in this specific situation. Gary lowers himself into the pipe. What he finds is not a survivor. It is a collection. Hundreds of bodies, stitched and preserved, lining the walls of a tunnel belonging to something ancient that has been doing this for a very long time. Now it knows his face. Now it knows what it wants. Every terrible thing that happens to Derry and Trish in Jeepers Creepers flows from that single moment of misplaced conscience. The creature was already gone. The evidence was already there. The only decision required was to leave it alone. Instead, Derry climbed into a pipe in the middle of nowhere, in the dark, alone. And whatever was at the bottom already knew he was coming. Theboard. Hereditary builds its dread slowly, through grief and fracture, and the specific horror of a family that cannot reach each other across the distances tragedy creates. When Annie Graham loses her mother, something begins unraveling in the house. Her daughter Charlie, her son Peter, her husband Steve, all of them drifting in separate directions while something unseen moves closer. Then Annie discovers a support group, and in that support group she meets Joan. Joan teaches her how to use a spirit board to contact Charlie, who died in a car accident that destroyed what remained of the family. The seance works, or appears to work. Annie brings the practice home, sets up the board, and calls her daughter back without fully understanding what she actually opened the door for, because it was never Charlie. The entity that had been circling the Graham family for generations finally has its invitation. Everything Annie thought she was doing, reaching her dead daughter, finding peace, holding her family together one last time, was exactly what she was designed to believe she was doing. Her grief was the mechanism. The board was the threshold. And the moment the candle blew out and something answered from the other side, the house was no longer theirs. Hereditary's cruelest detail is that Annie's decision came from love. She wanted her daughter back. The thing waiting on the other side of that board knew it. It had been counting on it for longer than she'd been alive.